The day following Fifth Army Commander Mark Clark's triumphal arrival in Rome, Allied forces began landing in Normandy in Operation Overlord. The Italian campaign was to be overshadowed by events in West Europe and on the Eastern Front from now on. Commander-in-Chief in Italy, Harold Alexander, ordered that the Fifth Army should push on to Pisa, while the Eighth Army's target would be Florence. There were hopes both cities could be in Allied hands by mid-July to allow an attack on the Gothic Line to begin in the following month. This would allow Allied forces in Italy either to wheel left into southern France or cross into the Third Reich in what is now Austria. Alexander's capacity to do that was undermined by Operation Dragoon, the invasion of southern France, which the US Joint Chiefs of Staff confirmed would begin on the 15th of August and involved both America's Sixth Corps and the French Expeditionary Corps. The Eighth Army was told that it would have to replace losses by retraining soldiers as infantry from roles that were no longer required, such as anti-aircraft gunners and aircrew from the Air Force. A German Supreme Commander, Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, planned to hold up the Allied advance with 3 defensive lines. The Albert Line, which ran to Gubbio, the Arezzo Line, which blocked gaps in the Tuscan mountains south of Arezzo, and the Arno Line from Pisa to Bibenia. The last 2 lines were essentially rearguard positions to slow the advance to the Gothic Line. The Eighth Army's advance involved 13 corps commanded by Sidney Kirkman on the left and 10 corps under Richard McCreary on the right. The Fifth Army, commanded by Mark Clark, advanced with 4 corps on the coastal plain and 2 corps on its right. 13 Corps' advance was spearheaded by the 6th South African Armoured Division with 24 Guards Brigade under its command. The division advanced with the Tiber River on the east and Lake Bolsena to the west at a rate of 10 miles a day, outstripping their flanking units. On the 10th of June, the Armoured Brigade, which was leading the division's advance, encountered the newly arrived 365 Infantry Division at Begno Reggio, 78 miles north of Rome, on the 11th of June. The 5th Battalion of the Grenadier Guards fought all night to clear a ravine before the town. The Royal Natal Carabiniers captured Bagno Reggio in the early hours of the 13th of June. The South African Division captured Oviedo the next day. To its right, 78th Division moved up Highway 71. 6th Armoured Division to the right reached Orte on the 9th of June, followed by Narni and then Todi on the 15th of June. On the 10 Corps front, the advance was more measured. Terni was captured on the 13th of June. Assisi was entered on the 17th of June and found to have been already captured by Italian partisans, while the 8th Indian Division, advancing further north, captured Ripi Ridge. On the night of the 18th of June, 10th Rifle Brigade of 6th Armoured Division captured Lacunano, west of Perugia. The following night, 7th Rifle Regiment seized Monte Malbo to its northwest. Meanwhile, 1 Guards Brigade pushed up the main road to Perugia. On the 20th of June, the town was captured. On the Fifth Army front, 1st Armoured Division under Major General Ernest Harman led the pursuit in the 4-Corps zone. The 34th Division was given the coastal zone, while 36th Division was allotted the inland zone. The main axis of advance inland was along a secondary road running through Bracciano, Oriola Romano, and then back into Highway 2 about 4 miles below Vetralla. Armoured units were nearly 25 miles north of Rome at darkness on the 6th of June. Civitavecchia was captured the next morning. Combat Command A and the 36th Division were matching this progress on the right. Viterbo and its airfields were captured without resistance on the 9th of June. On the 11th of June, 4 Corps headquarters took over command of the 6th Corps zone. 6th Corps headquarters moved to Naples and was assigned to 7th Army for the invasion of southern France. The 34th and the 36 divisions were attached to 4 corps. On the 2 corps front, 85th and 88th divisions advanced north of Rome on the road to Viterbo from Orte to Soriano. 4 corps took Paganico on the morning of the 20th of June as resistance slackened. On the 8th of June, 2 corps had been relieved by the French Expeditionary Corps. On the 13th of June, the French had reached the shores of Lake Bolsena. On the 20th of June, they were close to the Orchia River, which was the most formidable obstacle so far encountered north of Rome. By this time, orders had been for French formations to prepare for Operation Dragoon. The 1st Motorized Division was taken out of the line on the 24th of June, and other units were transferred quickly after. On the 8th Army front by this point, the race towards the Albert Line was being led by Chavat's force, a formation comprising 56th Reconnaissance Regiment, a squadron of armour from the Warwickshire Yeomanry, a company of 1st Royal Irish Fusiliers plus anti-tank troops and artillery. It was led by 56th Recce's commander Kendall Chavat. By the 21st of June, Chavat's force had advanced to a high point overlooking Lake Trasimeno. Formations of 78th Division behind were held up at Città della Pieve, which blocked Highway 71 to Florence until the early hours of the 21st of June. Other formations of 78th Division had been halted at Vaiano on the 20th of June, while the South Africans were repulsed at Chiusi, the western end of the Albert Line held by the Hermann Goering Panzer Division. On the night of the 20th of June, 2nd Fusiliers of 11th Brigade in 78th Division sent a patrol into San Fatuccio, the main German strong point blocking Highway 71 between Chiusi and Lake Trasimeno on the Albert Line. Plans were drafted for a divisional attack on the 21st of June. The story of the Battle of Lake Trasimeno will be told in the next episode of This Week in the Italian Campaign. On the 8th of June, 38th Irish Brigade and 78th Division had come out of reserve and reached the former headquarters of Field Marshal Albert Kesselring in San Oreste in the Tiber Valley. 3 days later, it was ordered to concentrate at Celano, further north. The following morning, 150 members of the brigade plus the piper band were transported back to Rome for a private audience with Pope Pius, arranged by the Irish ambassador to the Holy See, the brigade major, and Dan Kelleher, the brigade's Catholic padre. It was the first for Allied troops since the liberation of Rome on the 4th of June. The Irish Brigade marched into the Vatican at 8:45 in the morning of the 12th of June, 1944, and filed into the consistory chamber in the Apostolic Palace. London Irish Rifles Colour Sergeant Ted O'Sullivan was there and recorded his recollection of the moment in his memoirs. As each person entered, they were given a rosary and a papal blessing document. I turned to my neighbour and recognised Irish sergeants who were members of the Orange Order. At 9 o'clock, His Holiness Pope Pius walked in with his dignitaries. He was quite a small figure, dressed in a white soutane and a white skullcap. The brigadier knelt and kissed the Pope's ring. Despite his Protestantism, the brigadier was obviously thrilled that his brigade was making history. Pope Pius addressed us in perfect English, with but a trace of accent, and declared, "Dearly beloved sons, we bid you welcome. You belong to the nation which has ever belonged to God's Church since St. Patrick. We are well aware of the good which the Irish have done in spreading the faith from the shores of their green isle into many nations. We greet you and bless you with all our heart's affection, and your dear ones at home. God be with you always." The Mass Brigade played Killaloo. Rosary beads given to each soldier were blessed by the Pope. The whole assembly was given the pontifical blessing. The Pope walked out to the sound of pipes. We filed out. The retreat was beat on the steps of St. Peter's. Crowds of clergy stood around clapping, and beyond the square a vast crowd had gathered. The Catholics in the detachment, who were in the majority, and many others went into Mass at the Blessed Sacrament altar. I was the master of ceremonies, and there were about 10 other servers. I had served Mass in many strange places, but to do so in St. Peter's Cathedral was beyond belief. At the end of the ceremony, we were dismissed to have the day free until the afternoon. With a couple of others, I toured the cathedral open-mouthed at this splendour in the middle of a war. That afternoon, the Irish Brigade pilgrims were tracked back to the front line, now 30 miles further forward than when it had been when they left that morning.